Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So as always, just want to say a huge thank you to everyone, those who have been leaving comments and those who have been watching. I know this channel is a little bit hit and miss. I'm really hoping it does take off soon, but for those of you who have been loyal, I just really appreciate you guys. If you can do me a favour, just leave a like and a share on this video. Also leave a comment. If there's anything you disagree with what I say in the video, please feel free to say. Anything you do want to point out that you feel that I've missed, please feel free to say. I do read all your comments and always get back to you guys. So for today's case, well, it's really 4 stories that are broken down. And the reason for that is even though these are quite well-known cases, might be well-known for those of you who do watch a lot of true crime like I do, maybe not to just the average listener. I chose these ones about female paedophiles. I'm just going to say that off the bat. This is what this video is going to be covering. Now the reason for that was, I was scrolling through a lot of information online about the new law that's currently coming into place, and that's to do with the paedophiles in this country being chemically castrated. This then led me down to a path with comments on TikTok videos, and I always take them with a pinch of salt. Don't get me wrong, I don't believe everything that goes on TikTok, but it did raise a lot of concerns with it being on TikTok. And some of the comments that were being made, a lot of people were pointing out, well, what about female predators? Because obviously this report was only talking about men. And there was just seemed a lot of misinformation that was coming up. So a lot of people correctly, they were saying, well, the rate of female paedophiles is a lot lower than the men, which is true. For the ones that we know about, they make up, all different studies have different numbers, but it's said to be between about 5 to 10% of the sex offenders register is a female predator, whereas men make up the rest of it. But then there was a lot of people, mainly young girls that are on TikTok, they were saying, well, no, women can't be paedophiles, blah, blah, it's never happened, doesn't happen, which obviously is not the case. And there's even a lot of people that like to post their trauma on TikTok. I don't know if you guys have seen it, if you guys are aware of it. I don't necessarily agree that TikTok is the place to put these videos, but there was one that I come across the other day, and it was a young girl who successfully had taken her abuser, her female abuser, to court, and she won the case, and her abuser got quite a lengthy prison sentence. The amount of comments that she was getting on this video was quite worrying. So again, it was a lot of young women saying, oh, you know, it doesn't happen, it never happened. And then people even asking her what this woman could have done to her, which was shocking. Like, someone's sharing their trauma, being brave, you don't necessarily go, oh, what did they do to you? And you know, obviously that was quite upsetting. It probably upset the woman that was reading all these comments. So I wanted to look at these cases just to obviously make awareness that even though it is incredibly rare, these things do happen. Women can be predators just as much as men. So for the first case we're going to be looking at, it happened in 2009. I followed this one for quite some time. I remember when this story happened. I followed it in the papers, and just want to say that obviously, even though I've followed it for a long time, the information I could find on all of these was quite difficult, so I've had to break these down into 4 separate stories, mini stories. So for all that said and done, like I said, just a huge thank you, and we're going to get into today's case. So today's case, as the little cue card suggested, we're going to be talking about the Plymouth sexual abuse case from 2009. Now this involved 5 women and 1 man, and 2 of the women that were in this, they didn't really get spoken about. Any other video that I've watched on them, the other 2 don't get mentioned at all. But they were linked to this case, so I wanted to add them in just to give you that fresh perspective. Now, the main perpetrator of the case was a woman called Vanessa George. So Vanessa, she was born on the 30th of March 1970, and she was born and raised in Plymouth. She was the daughter of a shipbuilder. So she was quite wealthy, quite well off, come from a well-off family, quite affluent. As she grew older, she was described as the life and soul of the party. She was someone who many people would turn to with their secrets and blah blah blah, always up for a gossip. They said that if you needed a babysitter, Vanessa's was the name that was always on the top of the list. So Vanessa, she worked at her local nursery. It was a nursery called Little Ted's. And she was always seen as really cuddly. She was always hands-on with the children. And the nursery looked after children that were between the ages of 2 to 5 years old. And prior to what led to her arrest, Vanessa, she had never been in any sort of trouble with the police. And this meant, obviously, her DBS checks all come back clean. So she was obviously safe to work with vulnerable people. Now, by 2009, she had been married for almost 20 years at this point. She had 2 teenage daughters. And to outsiders, anyone looking in, it seems that she was pretty content with this life. She had been working for 6 years as a previous to working at Little Test. She worked as a teacher's assistant for 6 years, and the first clue as to what was happening was her husband said that he noticed that she was spending quite a long time on her computer. She was quite possessive about this computer. She would get jumpy if someone looks over her shoulder. She would get really snappy. If someone asked her if she could get off the computer. And a page that she joined on Facebook, so it was Facebook that she was communicating through, or the perpetrator said that they communicated through, shall I say. It was a profile called Against Child Abuse. And her husband even said that she was the last person he would have thought would have done something like this, because whenever a news report come on the story on the news about a paedophile, she would be the first one jumping up, screaming, "Cut his balls off!" Blah blah blah, like send him to prison. Now, whilst online, it was found that Vanessa was actually in contact with quite a large number of men, and they were all paying her the compliments, like, "We find you really attractive, you're really funny," and it's kind of validated her. And I'm not saying that she didn't love her husband and the husband didn't love her, but you guys know what it's like when you're in a long-term relationship and it just gets a little bit samey and you want something a little bit different. And sex life does sometimes go down the pan a little bit, so you're just looking for someone to kind of validate you and make you seem more human. And I don't know what it is as well, in our day and age, and even many years ago, just seems that anyone who reaches a specific age, particularly women, but some men as well, once they reach, I don't know, say past 35 into their 40s, they just seem to be kind of forgotten. Like I said, it is more so with women. So obviously at this point in time, she was in her 40s. So she probably just felt a little bit ignored, a little bit blindsided. So had to have that validation, to have that sort of attention. That's probably what she was craving at that point. She was later seen boasting with the mothers at the nursery about affairs, and that she was in love with one particular man. And this is where she meets, and the man that she says she's in love with is a man called Colin Blanchard. Now, Colin, at this point, he'd been married for 16 years, and people who knew Colin did not have a kind word to say about him. He was described as Billy Bullshitter. He would be boasted about how big his tellies were. He would boast about really stupid things that could be caught out. You know, he would boast about having palm trees imported over from Los Angeles. He would take Liverpool Football Club out for expensive meals and that on a private jet. Now the truth was that Colin lived in Rochdale, and I'm not saying obviously Rochdale is a rundown area. It's had its problems, like any other area in the UK. It's definitely had its problems over the years. But like I said, I live close to London, and London is a hotspot for crime. We can't deny that. He was said to have been chronically in debt. He even owed like £8,000 to his electricity bill alone. He would say that he was a movie producer. He had millions stashed away in Dubai in offshore accounts. And bizarrely, he was even compared to the character Del Boy from Only Fools and Horses. So, for those of you who are not in the UK, you might not actually know about this programme. It was massively popular in the 80s and 90s. It's still on repeat today, various different channels in the UK. Hugely popular still, and Del Boy was, I would say, more a lovable rogue. Like, you know, he was someone who heart was in the right place, but he worked on a market store and he handled stolen goods, and you know, but he was always trying to do right by his family, which doesn't sound like someone close to Colin Blanchard, shall I say. But like I said, he was compared to Del Boy. Now, Colin actually had previous convictions for possessing child abuse material. I know a lot of people, you like to say child pornography, but at the moment there is a movement to stop referring to it as child pornography, because pornography, it gives the idea that it's all consensual, and obviously this isn't. So we're trying to move over to calling it child sexual abuse material or exploitation material. So when I do say child abuse material, it's obviously what was referred to as child pornography. So at this time, he had been travelling home from a business trip in Thailand, and police become really suspicious of his laptop after some concerns were made from someone else in the public. And they looked at the laptop, and they found all the abuse material. And the material at this point, it had not been disseminated, so he had not sent it out. This was just for his viewing. And they did note that the person that was in the videos was not Colin. He was then put on the sex offenders register. He was given a caution for 5 years. Now, he had previously made contact with Vanessa in 2008, and he claims and he says that it was Facebook that they met on. They become close very quickly. And then around the same time, it was noted that while Vanessa was in contact with him, she started making a lot of excuses as to spending a lot of alone time with the children. She insisted that she was the one that would change the nappies, and this is when the abuse begins to start. Now, I just want to add a note that obviously what I've just described with Colin and Vanessa's relationship, it might sound like I'm trying to mitigate her actions. I'm not. No one, even if you're pressured, gun to your head, no one should be able to make you do these things. She's done this on her own volition, and as you hear on, she's the one that's sending it out to him, for him to send it out further. This is all on her volition. No, like I said, no one should be able to make you do any of this. So I don't want to hear in the comments that she was a victim in this, because she's not. So Vanessa, she was noted to have taken in a second mobile phone. She used to call it her fun phone. She, on some occasions, would even take in sex toys. She would then take photos or videos of the abuse, and then she would send it out to Colin. And she would take care to not include the children's faces in this, so it made it really difficult when the investigation started to identify which child was which. Now, police, when they began investigating, they believed that the number was around 300 victims, but quite quickly this dropped down to just 30, which is bad enough, don't get me wrong, but it's a significant drop. So Vanessa, she would send out these videos to Colin. He would then give her directions on what to do to the children. Also found was a lot of dark, graphic sexual fantasies in conversation between Vanessa and Colin. They had written these about each other. They had sent each other explicit naked photos of each other. So from 2008 to her arrest in June of 2009, they found 10,000 messages between her and Colin, and it was found that Colin was also having a similar relationship with the other women that I mentioned earlier. So they were called Angela Allen, Tracy Lyons and Tracy Dorber. Now Angela Allen, she was 48 at the time. She was actually put into contact with Vanessa herself through Colin. So Angela, she was a mother of one. She was described not as well connected as what Vanessa and Colin were. Sorry guys, cat was just making a bit of a ruckus up there. Sorry. She was described as living on the fringe of society, so she had a bit of a rough life. We're not going to deny that. Doesn't mitigate what she goes on to do, but it certainly is noted that she had a rough life. Like when she was investigated, when police went to her house, they noted that the house was in absolute disarray. She lived in Nottingham at the time. She had previously worked as a traffic warden, but ended up working as a sex worker. She soon began adding into Vanessa and Colin's conversations, and it literally became a contest between the three of them to see who could go the furthest, who could go the darkest. Angela was seen as the worst. She would be extremely graphic in what she described in her own child abuse material. She would also talk about the inclusion of animals. So Vanessa, like I said, she would disseminate all the material, and at one point she even sent Colin pictures and videos she had taken of her 14-year-old daughter. This would then be sent on to Angela, but obviously Colin was also in contact with the other Tracys. So Tracy Dorber, she was born in 1966 and she lived in Southport in Merseyside. So she was arrested when it found that she was abusing her 5-month-old daughter, whilst Colin was taking photos of this. So Colin was actually in a personal relationship with Tracy, and he would go to the house and they would abuse her 5-month-old daughter. And Tracy Lyons, she was a mother of 8, and at the time of her arrest she was actually pregnant with her 9th. So she was born in 1970. She also lived in Portsmouth. Now, like Tracy D, she was filming the abuse with Colin before it was sent out. But unlike the others, so obviously with the previous Tracy, Colin had actually gone there in person, but it was only Tracy L, so I'm going to refer to him as Tracy D, Tracy L. So with Tracy L, he was actually in a sexual relationship with her, and this has been for over a year. So what led the police to investigate this lot? So it was actually when Colin's business partner, he just believes that Colin is actually stealing money from their business account. And one day while Colin's out of the office, his partner looks at his laptop and he comes across all the child sex exploitation material, and quite quickly he notifies the police because the material wasn't even coded, it wasn't put into a private file, it was just there on the laptop. So Colin is actually away at this point on a business trip abroad, and the partner tells the police, oh, so he's due back on this date, he's going to be at Manchester Airport. So on that date, police go to Manchester Airport, and as soon as they see Colin, he's arrested immediately. On his possession, he also had another laptop which was full of material, and unlike the last time he was arrested previously, this laptop, it contained images of Colin abusing children himself. Now during his interview, Colin, he quickly divulges information on the women, and obviously this is just to take the heat off himself. So he throws all of them under the bus, rightly so. They need to be punished as much as he does, but he just quickly turns his back on all of them. And through the images, police are able to link Little Ted's nursery. So obviously it's something that I pointed out with, if you watched my video on Richard Huckle. Now, the way that the police were able to identify him was by scanning the background of the photos, and I believe they did the same with Peter Scully, if you watched that video as well. They scanned the background of the photos of things that sort of seem out of the ordinary. So this is what they do, and they managed to find the logo of Little Ted's nursery. So, at this point, Angela is actually fully aware of Colin's arrest. So when her home is raided, she's actually made no attempt to clean up at all. And not even any attempt to clean up and hide her involvement in the case. So she's discovered that she also was making her own material and sending it out. The 11th of June 2009, Vanessa is at Plymouth Magistrates Court to enter a plea. Angela on the day after, on the 20th of June, she's in Nottingham Crown Court, and they both plead guilty to all their charges. And not long, a couple of days after this, all three of them present at the same court, and this is the first time that the three of them had actually been in the same room together. The 10th of October, Tracy L, she's at Portsmouth. She's charged with 6 counts of abusing a 2-year-old son. And on the 5th of July 2010, Tracy D appears at Bristol Crown Court to face her 6 charges. Eventually, on the 15th of December 2009, Vanessa and Angela are given intermediate sentences. I wasn't really 100% sure what intermediate means. It was just basically they were told they had to serve a minimum sentence before they could be given parole. It just meant that even if parole was granted, it doesn't mean they were necessarily going to be released after this. So they were actually given both 7 years. So Vanessa was given 7 years, Angela was given 5 years. Now they both don't go on to serve those 5 years, like I said, they do get released at a later point. Colin, he was given an intermediate sentence of 9 years. Tracy L was also given 7 years, and Tracy D was given 4 years. But this was on her second verdict. The jury on the first actually failed to agree on a majority level. So they go back for a second time and they actually found her guilty. They agree on the majority level, and she's given 4 years. So Tracy L, she was actually released in October of 2011. She was given the time off due to the amount of time that she'd actually spent on remand. Angela, she was released in February of 2020, so she went above her 5-year sentence. Vanessa George, she was released in September of 2019, so she went over her sentence. Colin Blanchard and Tracy D, they're actually still held in their respective prisons. I couldn't find any more information on Tracy D, but Colin, he actually come up for parole again last summer, so the summer of 2024. He again was denied this. I don't think his next parole hearing won't be until another couple of years. Now, in an interview, some of the mothers of the victims, they still in hiding anonymity, like they don't want to be identified, and it's mainly to protect their children. They don't want their children to know about his past. They're hoping that the children won't have any sort of memories or any sort of adverse reactions. One of the mothers, her sons, has got the reactions. He has no core memory of the abuse, but his body sort of reacts to various different things. She said that the police informed them, so the day that Vanessa was arrested and the day that it all came out, it just started like any other day. She's gone to the nursery to drop up her son. Her son's like kicking up a fuss, he was screaming. Police were outside and they basically get told, go to the local church. There's a meeting at the church, everything will be explained. Everything sort of explained to them, and they said that some of the children were identified. Obviously it took a while, but they had to really examine the photos that they were looking at, and they could only examine and identify children through birthmarks, things like that. Obviously some parents to this day, they still don't know, because Vanessa has never ever given over any names of the children she's abused. That's one thing that she's always held on to, and she's never ever divulged that information. So it does kind of baffle me that she was actually given parole and released after her serving 10 years. I believe that should have been something that was put into her agreement, that she gives over that information, but obviously it wasn't. And in rule, obviously she's on a lifelong license, so any wrongdoing, even if she owns a phone that can access the internet, she can get recalled to prison. But it's still not enough, because like I said, there are people out there to this day that still don't know if their child was one of the children that was abused by Vanessa George. So, like I said, obviously this one is a case that I have followed. I remember this very, very clearly when it came out. But the information I could get was kind of difficult to get, because I had limited access to certain court reports, and I mainly had to get what information I could by reading various different sources and different newspapers. But that is the Plymouth sexual abuse case. I'm really interested to hear your voices and opinions, and just going to pause here and I'll. Okay, so this is part 2 of the video. So this story I followed again from when it first came out. So this was quite a fairly recent one. It was in the past couple of years. Started actually in the middle of one of the lockdowns. So obviously all of us were at home or locked up. We had a lot of time to spend on the internet. And this is when I first became aware of the story. So it begins in March of 2021, and police arrest a 66-year-old man called Paul Pickerel. He was from Runcorn in the north of England, and the police find that he's engaging in sexual conversations with what he believes to be a 13-year-old girl. He had contacted her through an app called Twoo. Quite a few of these apps out. There's Omegle, things like that. That predators seem to be able to quickly identify themselves with. And his name on there was Paul 55 Stoke-on-Trent. And 55 was regarding the age that he actually claimed to be, so he was knocking 11 years off his age. He discusses about slipping into bed with her when her parents and grandparents are out of the house. He asks her really about her first period and whether or not she's had her first period yet. So she responds, yes, she's had her first period, and he says, oh, well, that means you're a young woman now, you're ready for sex. And he tells her that he is 55 rather than 66. He, of course, as all predators do, he tries to assure her that obviously the whole thing's going to be their little secret. They're going to use the morning after pill, they're going to use condoms. And obviously she's reiterating that she's a child, she's 13, and he's like, well, you won't be, when we do have sex, you'll become a young woman. So this contact, it goes on for around 3 weeks, and he's attempting to meet up with her. He begins to send in indecent images of himself, and he's asking her to send some of herself. Now, it later transpired that the 13-year-old girl was actually a decoy from a paedophile hunting group, and they had access to and other social media apps and in their chat rooms to identify potential dangers. And so he quickly was identified as a potential danger. All this information is given over to the police, and in April 2021 he is released. He's arrested, sorry. He gives over a no comment interview, which always makes you seem guilty. I don't know if you guys are aware of the current case going on at the moment. The really young 21-year-old girl who was caught pinching and kicking and physically abusing children in a nursery. All over the internet at the moment. I will probably cover that in the future story. I just need to get more information on that. But in her police interviews that have been released online, she's given a no comment interview, and it just always makes you seem really, really guilty. So police, obviously, they look into his devices and they uncover reams and reams and reams of child sex abuse material. So it's equal to 141 images. 29 were depicted as category A, which is the worst of the worst. These all depicted children between the ages of 4 to 9 years old. There were also on his phone thousands and thousands and thousands of messages on a WhatsApp group. When printed off, it's equal to over 400 pages, and the messages were only between a month time span. So 400 pages of messages over a month time span, like insane. And this is with another paedophile, and this is quickly identified as a 36-year-old woman called Vicky Bevan from St Helens in Merseyside. So like I said, the messages span from a 4-week period from March of 2021 to April of 21, and they were sharing ideas on how to construct a cellar. And in this cellar, he wanted to kidnap, torture, rape, and even eat children. And they discuss how to actually fund this operation. Now, he even goes on to ask Vicky whether she actually means what she is saying, if she's in this for the long haul, and she's reiterating that she definitely is, she's definitely interested, she wants to do this. And she then puts forward the idea of charging money for the abuse of a really young girl who was under the age of 10. They haven't given a definite answer to who this girl is. They don't need to. She deserves to live the rest of her life in anonymity. All they said was that she was under the age of 10 years old, but this girl was in Vicky Bevan's care. And in the messages, Paul is seen inciting Vicky to carry out what abuse he wanted to see. And after his arrest, Paul is then sentenced to 20 months. But in August of 2022, he pleads guilty to even more charges, and he's sentenced in October of that year to a further 10 years imprisonment. So, police, they continue to look into Vicky Bevan. They find that she's been disseminating images of children herself. She's even abusing that same little girl in the videos. It's then found that Vicky has been organising for the child to be abused by 2 other men. These were 41-year-old Tony Hutton from Liverpool. He was actually a married man, he had 3 children of his own. And a 61-year-old man called Paul Rafferty from St Helens. So Vicky had made contact with Rafferty in November 2020. And Vicky initiates the abuse of this little girl and what he could actually do to her. She even agreed to him torturing the little girl. Rafferty goes on to ask her if she has any boundaries. She says nope, none at all, no limits. Like, literally whatever you want to do, you can do. Obviously, this poor child, she was orchestrated to the most horrendous abuse. It hasn't actually been said, and thankfully it hasn't been said what she had to endure. I'm sure what we're all imagining we don't want to imagine. It's pretty horrendous from what I have read and from what I've just told you guys, but they haven't actually put out any information of what went on. So this was carried out by Vicky between 2019 to 2021. She was aided with Tony and Paul, and all of the images that were taken were sent out via the messaging platform Kik. So a lot of you are aware of the messaging platform Kik. It was quite popular for some time a little while back. It's sort of died down now, but the security on Kick is very, very labs. I liken it to when you do access a porn website and it just literally just comes up with a button and says, "Oh, are you 18?" You press yes, almost like a pinky promise. That's what these things sort of operate as. What I will say is that when these sort of cases do come up, Kick are very good at responding and identifying, but I think that, for the safety of everyone, more security does need to be put in place in regards of this app, because even to this day, the security is very lax. So Vicky is arrested in October of 21. Her house is raided. Now, in interviews, she admits to sending out the messages to Paul Pickerel, but she denies having any part of the abuse. When the police look into her devices, she's in contact with 7 other paedophiles. She discusses drugging and raping young girls, and she's also seen to be in contact with a 13-year-old boy. When he points out his age, she says that she has no age limits. Despite her protesting that there was no abuse that carried on, she is confronted with the images and she breaks down in tears, and she says that she's sorry, which obviously none of us are going to buy. And this is quite a common quite a common thing with people who do get in trouble with the police, and particularly, again, is women that would typically do this. And this is on good authority. A really good friend of mine, her mum spent a long time in the police force. She was part of Thames Valley Police. And she would tell her daughters, if you do end up getting arrested, just cry during the interview and the police will not feel sorry for you. Obviously, not to the extent of what Vicky Bevan's doing. I'm talking about, I don't know if they got shoplifting or something. Just cry and police will feel sorry for you. So this is what Vicky's doing. She's trying to play on her emotions and trying to get the police to feel sorry for her, but she's been caught red-handed. There's no way of wiggling out of this. She said that she deeply regrets her actions. She deeply regrets anything that she had a part of this. In January of 2022, she pleads guilty to her offences, and this is by a video link because of COVID. And again, she's seen crying in the video. She admits to possessing the material. Finally, she admits to it. She also admits to possessing bestiality content. And obviously this was mentioned in the previous segment on this video with Vanessa George, but I've mentioned it in other videos as well that touch on bestiality, that the common sort of secondary paraphilia to pedophilia is bestiality and vice versa. So the two always go hand in hand. It's never just one or the other. So Tony Hudson and Paul Rafferty, they were both arrested in 2021, November of that year. They uncover even more sexual abuse material of the girl victim that Vicky had in her care. And Tony just puts all of the blame onto Vicky. He doesn't take any responsibility for his actions. He puts all the blame onto Vicky, saying he met her online and that she basically egged him on to carry out the abuse. And again, that's not going to mitigate. It's not going to mitigate with you, me, with the police. Like, no one should be able to force you to do this kind of shit. It just shows what a weak, insignificant piece of shit that he is, that he can't grow a pair of bollocks and actually admit to what he has done. he has to put all the blame. And don't get me wrong, obviously Vicky is not innocent in this whatsoever, but he's putting all the blame on the woman because he's weak. Paul Rafferty initially, he tries to go down the same road because he's a weak piece of shit as well. And in May of 2022, in Liverpool Crown Court, Vicky, Paul and Tony, they're all sentenced. In mitigation for Vicky's defence, they argue that she was acutely aware what she did was wrong, but she was actually stressed out because of the breakup of her marriage. Bollocks. Like, so many of us go through a hard breakup, the amount of divorces that go on throughout the years, and it does not mitigate whatsoever. The amount of divorced people that are in this country and worldwide do not go on to do what these people have done just because they're stressed. I'm stressed. Like, I've never done anything like this. Never will, never have, never got the inclination to, and I've had a very stressful life, let me tell you. And thousands of people have probably had it a lot worse than what I have, and they've had a lot worse than just a simple divorce, so that mitigation is nothing. They also coupled this with Vicky being bipolar, which again should not be a mitigation, because that to me is an insinuation that people with mental health conditions go out and do this kind of thing. They do not. Should never ever, and I've said this before again in other videos, they should never put mental health disorders, mental health issues in with cases like this, but they do. The judge acknowledges her diagnosis, but he actually said that it just made absolutely no difference whatsoever to the offences. She's given a life sentence with a minimum of 10 years to serve. So it just basically means that, like obviously I pointed out, once she's released, she'll be on a lifelong licence and she'll be monitored for the rest of her life. In his remarks, the judge said that the scale of depravity begged belief. And Vicky's family, obviously they have actually disowned her. They insist that she had a great upbringing, like nothing out of the ordinary, but are completely disgusted by her actions. And it put a lot of trauma on Vicky's family, so much so that the judge even placed a lifelong restraining order on Vicky, so that when she is released, she is not allowed to contact her family whatsoever. So Tony Hutton, he pled guilty to 4 counts against him. His counsel of defence said that he had finally taken ownership of his behaviour and he was given a 4-year sentence. Paul Rafferty pled guilty to all his charges. His defence said that he knows he deserves to be punished and was relieved for his punishment, which is absolute bollocks because he would put all the blame on Vicky during the investigation. So suddenly he's grown a conscience, or attempting to grow a conscience, or acting like he's grown a conscience. Absolute bullshit. So he was sentenced to 10 years with a 4-year licence. Now, during the investigation as well, there was another man who was identified as being in contact with Vicky, and both of them were sending material to each other. So he was a 31-year-old man called Christopher Smith from Devon. So Vicky has actually sent him videos of herself abusing children. He replies that he wished he had been there in the presence to join in. In a video of Vicky abusing a boy, and it's not said how old this child was, but she was clearly seen with a male child and abusing him. He replies, "Oh, that's really hot." Police then pose as users on Kick. They make contact with Christopher, and he's asking to trade images. He's going to send his own images out. He sends out 3, and he is then quickly arrested. His phone is searched and it uncovers 2 videos and 36 images sent from Vicky of various categories, various different children. Christopher is then sentenced to 2 years and 4 months at Exeter Crown Court. Now, I couldn't find any information on, like, 3 years down the line of any of them, so Tony, Paul, Chris, or Vicky. Obviously, we know that they're not going to have the easiest time whatsoever in prison. You know, from what I understand, in women's prisons, they tend to be a little bit more spontaneous with their attacks on prisoners, on sex offenders, shall I say. Men seem to, I don't know, sort of react in a different way from what I understand. Just to put on the side note, I don't know if you guys are aware here, if you've seen the interviews with Vanessa Frake. Really, really interesting, or even read Vanessa Frake's book. So she, for those of you who don't know, she was a prison governor. Spent a long time as a prison working in the prison service, beginning in 1986, I believe, and she worked all the way to her retirement in 2013. She has seen it all. So she started off working in women's prisons. She then transferred over to men's prisons. And she's spoken about one occasion, obviously not naming names, I don't think she can name names, but she said that there was a woman that she was in charge of looking after, and this woman was in prison for holding down her children while the husband raped them, and while she was transferring the prisoner around different parts of the prison, you know, she had to keep reminding this woman not to tell anyone what you're actually in for. Like, they had to make up a cover story. And obviously, as it goes in prison, secrets cannot stay secret. Someone found out, and the woman was literally walking through to go to the kitchens. Another woman comes up to her and she's concealed a weapon in her hand. She had melted 2 razor blades into a toothbrush. She comes around and literally within seconds just sliced it down this female paedophile's face, and it left like 2 deep long gashes with a bit of skin hanging in the middle, and there was not much they could do with it. Like, she's left with permanent damage on her face. Good, but it literally just happened within a flash, and Vanessa herself said that it will be a spontaneous thing that women do. So I can't imagine any of them, particularly Vicky, because she will be seen as worse because she is a woman in the eyes of the female prison population. So I can't imagine she'd have an easy time of it. And obviously I can't imagine Tony, Paul, or Chris are having an easy time of it. In January of 2025, so only this year, it's Paul Pickerel, who started this video with. He was found dead in his cell in HMP Leyland. No information was actually released on what he had died from, what was the cause of his death. It just said that he had been found dead. So I think we can all just, join in and celebrate with that little bit of information. But as to what actually killed him, we don't know. So that is part 2 of this video. We're going to go now on to... So, with this case, as suggested, it's the Norwich sexual abuse case run for a 10-year period. This was one that I come across a few years ago now. So a friend of mine actually lived in Norwich a few years ago for a short period of time. I went out to visit, and this was something that was still kind of discussed within the area. And I wasn't really fully aware of the names of the perpetrators, but I've become aware of this case. And so I had to have a little look into it, and it uncovered a hell of a lot. And it all stemmed from police investigations. The perpetrator tried to flee to another country and in an attempt to keep her baby, and there was a lot of press coverage in regards of her, what was seen at the time as unfair treatment. So the woman in this story, her name was Marie Black. She was an insurance worker, and at this particular time, so this story blew up about 10 years ago. At the time she was 34 years old. So she was living in France with her second husband. She was expecting her sixth child. This child was born in 2012, February 2012, and was a little girl. So Marie was with her husband, his name was Joe Wallace, and they had actually met originally at school when they were children. They become, as many school people do, they become boyfriend and girlfriend, but they end up breaking up and they go on to have relationships with other people before fate actually brings them back together further down the line. So when their relationship initially broke up, Marie meets her first husband. He was a man called Jason Adams. He was from Norwich as well. And they marry and they go on to have 5 children together. And the marriage had actually broken down by 2008 due to domestic violence issues. And Marie leaves Jason, she takes her children with her, and she meets a man called Michael Rogers who lived in Romford. Romford, which is actually my hometown. And this relationship ends up quickly deteriorating, and she reunites with Joe Wallace. The pair get married. Her 5 children, they're taken off her for safety reasons. So it's found that she was still in contact with her first husband, their father, and social services were just concerned about the children's safety because of the reports of the domestic violence. So, because of this, they were worried that Marie was still in touch with Jason, and they made it official that they were going to take control of her next baby as soon as the baby was born. So she moves over to France in the initial hope of keeping her little girl. So they go over in November of 2011. She's 20 weeks pregnant, and like I said, it was reported that she was in contact with Jason, and he had recently been arrested for assaulting someone else and charged for this. So like I said, in February she gives birth to a little girl, and social services are told by a call, so Norwich social services told by a call, go over to France and bring the baby back. So they work with the French social services. The French courts agree to remove the baby temporarily from Marie's care, and Marie, she begins selling her story to the papers. I'm going to post up a little picture here of the article. I'm going to blur out the baby's face because she absolutely doesn't need to be identified in this. So, she states in these articles, I left without my baby and I cried all the way home. She's given 2 weekly supervised visits with her daughter. And on one visit in March of 2012, Joe, he takes notice of French police at the centre, and they're with 2 social workers from England. and they take the baby from the centre and take her back to England. They are then given Skype sessions over the next 3 months with their daughter, and the solicitor then tells Marie and Joe to speak to the English courts to get an urgent ruling on the case. In June of that year, so 2012, the baby is given back to Marie, and this while she's still in France, and Joe and Marie are actually cleared of any wrongdoing, so the baby is given back to them full time. Unbeknown to Joe and the social workers at this time, police in Norwich had begun an operation called Operation Moccasin. So at this particular time there was a lot of these different police teams that were working on various different historic abuse cases, most famous of which was Operation U-Tree, which looked at Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris and a lot of other media personalities. So they identified a abuse ring in Norwich in 2010 after one of the victims had come forward, and this dated back to 2002. Marie was named as the ringleader. So obviously, like I said, Joe Wallace, her second husband, had nothing to do with this. He had no idea of this. So this was when Marie was actually with Jason, who was 44 at the time of the investigation. And this was with 8 other people. So the ages at the arrest were Michael Rogers, so her second husband, he was 46, Carol Stadler, she was 60, Anthony Stadler, 63, Nicola Collins, 36, Andrew Collins, 52, Judith Fuller, she was 31, Denise Barnes, she was 43, and Kathleen Adams, she was 85 at the time of her arrest. So the victims in this case, there were 5 children, 2 boys and 3 girls. I just want to put on a note here that there's been a lot of speculation as to who these children were, as there always is. And a lot of people have identified in different forums that I've been visiting. So it involved 5 children. She had 5 children taken off her. Were these her own children? It's not said. It's really not helpful when people do this. So I would ask if you just keep that sort of information to yourself. It's really not helpful to the case, and obviously the people that were infected by this, they deserve to live the rest of their life in anonymity so they can heal from this. All of the children in this, they were under the age of 13 at the time when the abuse begins, and when it's investigated, they go into detail about what actually happened to them. So, one of the boys, he details that the adults would play card games, and whoever won would decide which child they would take to be abused. They would then be taken to a room, they'd be made to touch the adult's private parts and vice versa. He said that they would be treated like sex toys at parties, hotel rooms, private addresses. The adults would watch and make the children have sex with one another. The women would take the girls to one room to be abused, and men would take the boys to another to be abused. He stated that the children's toys would be used as things like Barbie dolls and things like that. And this boy in particular, he said that he had actually been made to have sex with Kathleen on numerous occasions. So bearing in mind, obviously Kathleen was the oldest, she was 85 at the time of her arrest. 2002, she would have been late 60s, early 70s, I believe. He said that they would be awarded with certificates and stickers, and these stickers would say things like, "Oh, secrets are good." And according to the children, Marie was always present at these parties. She was always present for the abuse, and she would just she would film it, she would instruct it, and she would just stand there laughing. He said that him and the other victims, they felt that nothing actually wrong was going on. They didn't know what was going on was wrong. They thought that all of this was completely normal. It's just something that children do with adults. And despite all the information that the police are given, the case is actually closed early in 2010. And the police quote at the time, the sheer number of allegations made the claims implausible, which always baffles me. You know, when you're getting people saying the same thing, 5 children saying the same thing, I don't know how that could be made to seem implausible, but that's what they say at the time. But it's reopened in December of 2012 with further evidence disclosed. So Marie, Jason and Michael, they're arrested in 2013 with the other 6 to follow. And the trial was due to begin in 2014 but was delayed due to concerns about changes made to statements. So Ofsted had listed the team of social workers in Norwich as inadequate, and the social workers were told to go back and tidy up any loose ends in their reports. They had to be told to make sure that there was no evidence of false memories had been planted on the children, and so all of this was done, and it just made the reports not for a reliable reading. The trial begins in July of 2015 and it lasts for around 3 months. Marie, Jason and Michael, they were held on remand since 2013, and all 10 of the suspects faced 101 charges. Carol Stadler, so she was facing charges of ABH, but she was cleared of any other charges in this. The judge noted that Marie Black was the constant factor in all of the crimes. He stated that you used children for your own and other sexual pleasure and gratification, and the amount of child sexual abuse of the most serious kind is astronomical. He outlined that the children had been taken to various parts of the country, they had been raffled off as prizes, and during all of this, Marie, as I stated obviously a minute ago with the Vicky Bevan case, she was known to be crying. She kept saying that she was being stitched up, that she was innocent. She chooses not to give evidence in her own defence, but she pleads not guilty to all of her charges. Her defence said that she herself had been the victim of domestic abuse. Jason was the manipulative party. And that evidence on Michael Rogers' phone was present that proved that he exploited Marie. Defence added Marie lacked the intelligence and wit to be part of a Machiavellian scheme of this nature. They added that Marie herself had been groomed by the age of 13, which, if true, is terrible. If true, it should have put her off of anything like this, but it didn't. They try and add that obviously Marie is a vulnerable woman, she was corrupted, and the abuse was mainly from Michael and Jason. The defence challenged the children's accounts, saying they could have been interfered with by others, but sentencing took place in September 2015. And thankfully Marie is found guilty along with Michael and Jason and also Carol. So Marie, she is given a 24-year sentence to serve, so she will be released after 24 years. Michael was given life for 24 years and Jason was also given 24 years. So, like I said, Carol was found not guilty of the other offences in regards of the sexual exploitation, but she was found guilty of ABO. She was given a 6-month sentence. The others in this case, despite Kathleen Adams being named as one of the women that the boy was forced to have sex with, she, along with the others, was all found not guilty of all the charges. They ended up walking free. And Marie, as all other paedophiles do, she doesn't accept her sentence, she doesn't accept her fate, she still maintains that she's innocent. She lodges an appeal really, really quickly, actually by just 2 months later in November of 2015. This, thankfully, was refused in February 2016 by just one judge. She then lodges a second appeal in April 2016, and again, by a month later, in May of that year, this was also refused. So no other reports have said and since stated that she's attempted again. It hasn't said that she's accepted her sentence, but obviously she still is in prison to this day. So, Jason Adams, he states that he rejects all the charges he was found guilty of, but he said that he neglected the children and that his actions were due to tiredness and temper because he worked shift patterns, which is bollocks. I work shift patterns. Like, obviously, what I do on here and my gigs that I do, are not my only source of income. I also have a retail job that I do, and it means that I do work quite long days, and I finish late. Obviously, you guys might be aware that up until last year I was working at a pub, so that meant even later nights and very, very long days. So that doesn't mitigate anything, and there are millions of people out there, probably you who are watching now, work shift patterns, you work a lot of late nights. Do you go on and do this because you're tired? No, I don't do this. I'm very, very tired. I've never ever gone and done this, so that should not be a mitigating factor whatsoever. And it's just his way of trying to wriggle out of, because he doesn't want to be seen as what he is. But we all know what he is. We all know what Marie Black is, and all the others. And just because they were found not guilty doesn't mean they weren't there because they were named. Anthony Stadler, he spoke out stating that he had no doubts he would be cleared and that the trial would be a nightmare. This was a sentiment shared by all the others. And like I said, obviously just because you've been found not guilty doesn't mean you are innocent in my eyes. It just means that there was really a lack of evidence to prove that you were guilty. This one was a little bit shorter than the other two. It was just literally just down to the amount of information that I could find, but I still wanted to put it in here because I am aware of this case. You guys might not be, some of you might be, but I just felt like I needed to put it in there. So, again, just going to take a pause here, and I'll be back for the final. Hey guys, so this particular story, again, fairly recent, only in the past few years. I became aware of this story, a few months ago. So it was actually when I was investigating and looking into the case of Eunice Spry that I did back in October, and it was while I was investigating and researching the Jehovah's Witnesses, I come into contact with a man from Texas. And he was one that gave me a lot of information on the witnesses, and I noticed one of the things that he shared was this abuse case. So I read it, and it led me to other articles in regards of this woman. So again, the information is very scarce. Only certain things I can access from the UK. But I felt like I wanted to share this story with you guys, because this woman is a predator of the highest level. Like all the others that I've mentioned in these videos, she acted completely on her own volition. There was no other. There are other players involved, cyberly, but there was no one involved in her personal life. She was just doing this because she had her own predilections. So it begins in December of 2018, and it's when the Homeland Security Investigation Group, the cyber investigation part of that team, they're looking into child predators in the area. And on the 9th of December that month, they are looking at Kick Messenger. So obviously I just spoke about Kick Messenger in the Vicky Bevan section. And they become aware of a female user who is sending out videos to other people, and these videos of her abusing a child. So the first one is an image of her naked in the bathroom. But like I stated with a previous section of this video with the Vanessa George bit, and obviously I highlighted the Peter Scully and Richard Huckle part, they scan these photos for anything that really stands out to them, and what stands out to them is the bathroom counter, and the countertop in particular is maroon. And this really stands out because obviously it's an unusual thing to have in your house. Obviously everyone will have white, marble, black, but this one happens to be maroon. So they take note of this. The agents scan more of the photo. They discover a video further in the chat. The same woman, she's in a bathtub and she's with a little boy, estimated to be around 2 to 3 years old. And at first the little boy is just playing with water, as all children do when they're in the bath, and the woman is noted to be masturbating and rubbing her breasts. In another video, they're in the same bath. The boy is sitting between her legs, and she reaches over and begins playing with his private parts. Another video, they're in the bath and the boy jumps in between her legs and he begins playing with her private parts. The group chat, she's sending out messages, she's in contact with a lot of other paedophiles, and she's saying things like, oh, he's just stuck his finger in my pussy, he felt so good, I'm so horny. The other members, they are egging her on, they're inciting her to do more, to carry out more. And one of them says, I'll give it a kiss or a suck. And she replies, well, maybe when he's asleep. I'm nervous to do this when he's awake. The other members, they carry on, they're encouraging her to go further, and she says, I'm going to drop my phone and I'll try and play with it if he lets me. She finishes with, I'll have some more fun later, glad you all enjoyed, although I was a little nervous, and there's a lull at the end of that. Again, the others are carrying on with like different requests. They say that they can't believe that he actually touched her, and they congratulate her for a job well done. And she goes on to say, oh, he does it on his own now. It took me a long time, but I've been going at his pace. It's been like a year now, nearly 2. The very next day, on the 10th of December, the agent who identified the abuse is able to get the identity of this woman. He actually sends out a request to Kick Messenger, so like I said earlier, Kick, when they need to be, they are very good at identifying these people when they give over the information. So on that particular same day, Kick do give over the information of a 25-year-old woman called Alexis Kiera Sidney. I had to go back and sort of, because I found out she was born in 1993, so I just sort of had to go back to how old I was in 2018, because I was born in 1992. So they look into her IP address. This is through the Kick account, and they find that she's located in Houston, Texas, and they come across the fact that she's put the Kick account under her private email address, personal email address, sorry. So they look further into this email address. They find a link to a Facebook page, and they find images of Alexis. She's posing in the same bathroom with her own countertop, and there's images of herself with this little boy. So it's believed that this little boy was her son. That same evening, agents, they actually go to Alexis' address and confront her. She answers the door. She's noted as to being really cooperative with the investigators, and they even spot the little boy in another room of the house. She's arrested fairly quickly. She's read her rights, and when she is questioned about the videos, Alexis, she, like I said with the other women, she begins crying, and she gives out a full confession. So after a search of her devices and of the house, they find 100 images and 120 videos of child sex exploitation material. And these didn't just involve this little boy, they also involved a relative's daughter. So I'm assuming like a cousin or a niece. It was just said that it was a relative's daughter. It was around the same age as the little boy. The material that she had accumulated and disseminated and created, it was all kept on a personal storage account. She had actually been a member of this particular Kick group since the previous month, in November of 2018. She was not only sending out the material she was making, she was also in receipt of other people's material. And police obviously begin their investigation. She's held on remand. Unfortunately, the family of the little girl have to be notified as to what's gone on. They obviously put the little boy into the care of someone else. It's not said who, if he went to a relative or to the care system, but obviously she's put on remand. In May of 2022, Alexis, she pleads guilty to all of her charges. She is eventually sentenced to serve at least 40 years imprisonment. She's given a $18,000 fine to be given to her victims, and upon her release in 40 years' time, she will be supervised for the rest of her life. She'll be placed on the sex offenders register for the rest of her life. And it's kind of good with the American justice system that they do not fuck about, they do not play about with their sentences. You guys are obviously fully aware of that. In the UK, we put a lot of emphasis on rehabilitation rather than punishment. America do it differently. Like, obviously they put a lot of emphasis on the punishment side rather than the rehabilitation side. And it's kind of why you'll see in American prisons is sort of run like the army, very, very strict, and they're put to like hard labour. Whereas in this country, you know, they're given a TV, they're given PlayStations, and a lot of people don't see that as a punishment, but it's because the prison service in the UK, they put a lot of emphasis on the fact that the restrictions on your freedom is the punishment. But if you give someone nothing, just put them in an empty room, how are they meant to be rehabilitated? That's how the prison service in the UK see it. The psychological evaluation of Alexis concluded that she was average to a high risk to re-offend. It was noted that she had actually had a strong feeling, a strong sexual feeling towards children since she was 10 years old. And the mother of the 3-year-old girl who Alexis had abused spoke out at him and saying, obviously, that we trusted you, you've let us down, like, how could you do this to our daughter? We put her in your care because she had had play dates with the little boy, and you have completely and utterly destroyed her. Robert Kurtz, who actually led the investigation, said that the callous and brazen manner in which this individual sexually exploited the minors and then published the material is unconscionable. But thanks to the tireless efforts of our HSI agents, we were successful in tracking her down and putting her in prison for the next 40 years. She would no longer be able to play on the vulnerability of our children, and he put a strong emphasis on the phrasing of our children. And obviously you guys are aware of the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, and a lot of people do agree with that. It's a sentiment that we all have in the UK, probably worldwide as well. It just takes one bad apple to come out of the woodwork, or a maggot to come out of the woodwork in this case, and absolutely destroy any of that trust that we have to function as a society. So, Alexis, she understandably, or not understandably, sorry, that was the wrong word, expectedly, that's the word I was looking for, sorry, expectedly, she put in a appeal for her sentence. So this was in May of last year. She lodges an appeal. She states that the sentence she received was unreasonable. And this was based on assumptions and incorrect information. Like, how incorrect was the information? Because it was clearly you in the videos. It was clearly you inciting the chats and engaging with these other perverts. It was clearly you that was abusing the children. But according to her, this was all incorrect. She said that her psychological report basically said that her paedophilia was a sexual orientation, but she put it down to her having a mental health order, which again should not be put forward. Paedophilia is not a mental health order, and it just completely discounts anyone who does have a mental health condition. And it's the same breath, it's not a sexual orientation, because I can speak on behalf of anyone in the LGBTQ plus community. I can speak probably, I don't know, but I can probably speak for anyone who identifies as a heterosexual. We will not accept you. You are not, it's not an orientation, and it's definitely not a mental health disorder. But she also said they discounted any of the abuse that she had to endure when she was a child, which again is terrible, but should not be a mitigation for you to go out and carry the abuse. Ideally, it would have put you off carrying out that, but it didn't. So you shouldn't be putting that in there. That appeal currently, from what I can gather, with the very little information I could find on this case, that appeal is still ongoing, so only time will tell. If I do come across anything else about this, I will update and put it out there. But obviously this was just a short section with the information that I could find on this case. Now, we'll take a lot of pleasure in knowing that none of these women and none of the men that are involved, any of them, will have an easy time serving their sentences. Thankfully, one, like I said, Paul Pickrell, he has died. Hopefully the others to follow suit. But just take pleasure in the fact that obviously they're not going to have an easy time in prison. No one wants them in their society. I certainly don't want them in the LGBT community. I guarantee and speak on the behalf of the heterosexual people out there that you guys don't want her, Vanessa, Vicky, everyone else who was mentioned in this video. You do not want these people in your community. The fact of her putting that in there in her report and trying to say that it's not an orientation but a mental health order, why it was even put as an orientation in the first place, baffles me. Sorry to go on a little bit of tangent, guys. It just kind of really hurts me, that bit. But I just want to say a huge thank you to you all. I'm really sorry that the information I could find on all of these cases was really scant. The reason for that is it's when it does come down to a woman who is a sexual abuser, they do get sentenced in different courts. You guys might be quite aware of this. So it's usually a court that's held private. When it is put out to the public domain, like these cases have, the information is still really scarce, and there's certain limitations that are put on the reporting. But I still just wanted to divulge any information I could find and give you guys the information I could find. So it's the main reason why it is 4 separate stories in one video, because I couldn't find enough information to make a video on each separate one. So I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you. I know obviously it's probably a tough listen. I am aware of obviously everyone's limitations when it does come to crimes against children, but these stories do need to be told, and I felt like this was this was a really important topic to touch on because of what's going on in the world at the moment, and in particular in the UK with the law that's passed about chemical castrations. So again, just a huge thank you to you all, and I'll see you guys very, very soon for the next true crime story with Silhouette. Sorry I kind of waffled on a little bit there, but it just kind of did irk me at the end there. Yeah, take care guys, and I'll see you.